The UFC has just released a new policy that prohibits fighters from wagering on the promotion's fights. Also, the Nevada State Athletic Commission has sanctioned Dana White's Power Slap League in what they're calling a new form of combat sports. Then Charles Oliveira would rather drop to 145 to challenge Alexander Volkanovski for the 145-pound title in Australia. Lastly, Henry Cejudo is contemplating retirement after missing out on the latest Alexander Volkanovski clash. Here's the latest MMA news on your favorite MMA Quick Takes. According to ESPN.com, the UFC will now prohibit betting on UFC fights after a memo was sent out to athletes and their teams. In the letter obtained by ESPN, Chief Business Officer Hunter Campbell wrote, "The UFC Athlete Code of Conduct will now prohibit wagering on UFC fights. The prohibition will also include fighters' teams and certain others." Campbell told ESPN, quote, "As the sport has grown over time, the overwhelming majority of states that regulate sports gambling have some prohibitions on inside betting activity, and this wasn't something the UFC advanced independently. This was something the UFC set forth in response from governmental agencies aware we are also subject to governmental regulation as we're licensed promoters in virtually every state. It's the natural evolution of the sport." The memo further noted that some states bar athletes from wagering on events or organizations that they're affiliated with, a ban that can also be extended to fighters. The reason for this, they say, is that training teams and family members also have access to inside information relating to athletes and their events. Betting sites have become a major sponsor for UFC fighters and MMA athletes all over the world, especially since sports betting has become legal in many more states. Even our show is sponsored by a betting company. I understand what the UFC is trying to do. They're trying to regulate the integrity of their sport, and I can get on board with that. People give boxing a lot of hell because boxing is assumed to be rigged in about 90% of their fights. I honestly couldn't imagine, nor do I ever want to imagine, the UFC finding themselves on that same slippery slope. And to think that the UFC is taking extra measures to ensure that they're not fixing their fights and fighters aren't taking dives in an effort to win some cash on the side, I find that extremely admirable as an MMA fan. Fighters like Justin James, who competed in the UFC back in 2020 and 2021, has openly admitted to gambling on his own fights. And fighters on their social media channels have routinely opened up on their accounts of gambling on fights. The UFC is just doing what they think is necessary to keep their dignity intact. I think this is a great idea by the UFC. I honestly think it's something that should have been done a long time ago. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree? Should the UFC kind of give them a little bit more leeway and allow them to bet on their fights to make extra cash? I'm sure a lot of people probably think so, especially given the fact that fighters aren't making much money and UFC ring girls are arguably making more than fighters. So fighters are just looking for an opportunity to make a little extra cash on the side, and I totally get that. But by allowing them to do that, it could jeopardize the sport as a whole. And I don't think any other MMA fan would want other outsiders to see their sport as anything other than legitimate. Next up, Dana White's Power Slap League has officially become a commissioned sport. On Tuesday, the Nevada State Athletic Commission voted to regulate and oversee the activities of a promotion called Dana White's Power Slap League. This is not a joke. In its simplest terms, slap fighting consists of two individuals standing across from each other and taking open hand slaps to the jaw until one of them can't continue. According to Bloody Elbow, it's common to see competitors badly concussed or fall completely unconscious due to blows. Slap fighting is all offense and no defense. Let's not forget that slap fighting has actually seen its first death already. On October 22nd, 2021 in Poland, a 46-year-old slap fighter fell to the ground after being knocked unconscious. He was knocked down 4 times during that event and suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. He was later taken to the hospital where he was put into a medically induced coma, never regained consciousness, and he died of multiple organ failure. When asked about it, he said that it made all the sense in the world to go toward the regulation, but I have to be honest, even as a regulated sport, look at boxing for example, we still see very severe injuries and sometimes even death. If a death has already happened in this sport, if you even want to call it that, why in the world would the UFC want to put themselves in a position to sanction their own version of it? The UFC has a pretty decent reputation already for maintaining the health and safety of the fighters. I honestly couldn't imagine any reasonable excuse for why they think that this is a good idea. Is it really a sport, and is it really fighting if the fighters can't defend themselves? I don't understand the entire concept of this sport. I really don't get why they're calling it a sport in the first place. I don't think the UFC should get involved in sanctioning something like this. And I'm interested to see how it goes with new UFC fans. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think the UFC should move forward with sanctioning a sport like this? Do you think this is even considered a sport? Would you get involved in something like this or watching something like this as a fan? I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Next in today's news, Charles Oliveira is considering dropping to 145 pounds to challenge Alexander Volkanovski for his belt. In the last MMA Quick Takes, we discussed how Dana White thought it was appropriate for Alexander Volkanovski to take the winner of Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. Volkanovski for the 155-pound title sounds pretty interesting and something that could entertain a lot of MMA fans. Also, it would put Volkanovski in contention for being a two-division champ. But that's not how Charles Oliveira sees it. Charles Oliveira wants it the other way around. He wants to be the two-division champ. He wants to move down to 145 and fight Alexander Volkanovski in Australia. Charles Oliveira told reporters, quote, "First of all, we're going to focus on what happens at UFC 280. My timing is to actually fight in Brazil afterwards. If we're going to make this happen with Volkanovski, we're going to fight in 2 weight divisions. I can fight in Australia in February, but for his belt, I have a great team to get down to 145. I have to be honest, I didn't expect this from Oliveira, although I think I should have. Charles Oliveira had a weight cut disaster at UFC 274. I'm honestly not sure if it's a really good idea for him to be moving back down to featherweight anytime soon. He's doing a great job where he is right now, and honestly, I think I would rather see the Volkanovski fight at 155. I'm also a little bit concerned that the fact that Charles Oliveira is even pondering this or considering talking about this, he might be a little bit distracted going into this fight, which is not good for me and my picks or anybody who picked Charles Oliveira. Hopefully I'm wrong about that, but I really need him to focus here because Islam Makhachev is not an easy opponent. Regardless, that's down the future. We need to focus on right now, UFC 280. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. Would you like to see Charles Oliveira moving down to 145 to fight Alexander Volkanovski for the belt, or would you rather see it the other way around? Let me know why in the comment section below. Lastly, Henry Cejudo is contemplating retirement after missing out on a clash with Alexander Volkanovski. Wasn't this guy already retired back in like 2020? He beat Dominic Cruz at UFC 249. He threw in his gloves. What is he even talking about? Oh, I remember. He said for the right price, he would come back. I gotta be honest. I know some people are still really high on the Henry Cejudo train, but he really turned me and I know a lot of other fans off when he pulled the whole Triple C cringe thing around, and a lot of his actions had to do with him making more money. I understand fighter pay is a huge issue right now, and a lot of fighters are complaining about it. Henry Cejudo made the move that he thought was necessary in an effort to get Dana White to pay him more money. But once Dana White decided that he wasn't going to be paying Cejudo any more money than what he was due at that time, Cejudo completely dropped off the face of the planet. And now he only comes back when he feels that it can make his face relevant. I can't say I kill the guy for that. I understand what he's doing. It's a business move, but at the same time, it's kind of making me lose respect for him a little bit more. Now that Volkanovski has announced his intentions to move up to the lightweight division, I think Henry Cejudo should just lay low. If he wants to come back, then come back, but don't start trying to ploy his name into someone else's situation. Let's also not forget that Cejudo had some choice words to say about Dana White. Does he honestly expect any respect in return? He did backtrack later on and say that he still has a lot of respect for Dana White. He says he wants to fight the best and he wants to prove himself, and I hope that somehow he can make that happen for himself. But for right now, I really have no interest in Henry Cejudo. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. Do you want to see Cejudo come back? Do you want to see some sort of rift go on between him and Volkanovski? I have to be honest, 145 has no clear contender right now, and Cejudo had 2 titles. I'd rather focus on the guy that's trying to become a 2-division champ himself. Let me know in the comment section what you think. That's your brief rundown on this morning's MMA news. Don't forget, we're going to be live tomorrow, Thursday morning, for the UFC 280 press conference. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure you like, hit subscribe, and definitely hit that notification bell. This is your latest MMA news on your favorite MMA Quick Takes.